Alright guys, so today we're going to start chapter 6, and here we're going to talk about cell growth and cell division. Chapter 6 is really going to focus on the stages of mitosis. When we get to chapter 7, we're going to talk about meiosis, which is a very similar process, but we're going to use those for sexually reproducing organisms in order to make their sex cells, eggs and sperm, where mitosis is typically utilized to make new body cells, so skin cells, muscle cells, that kind of stuff. So if we remember all the way back to talking about cell theory, when we talked about the structures of the cell itself, we talked about this gentleman Virchow, and he was the first one to really study cell reproduction. And he's the one who gave us the piece of the cell theory that stated that all cells come from other cells. So this chapter is really going to go into, well, how do we go from one cell and create new cells from that? Why do we need them? All right, well, if we remember our discussion about cell surface area to volume ratio, our cells can't get infinitely big. So in order for us as humans to have gone initially from one fertilized cell after the egg and the sperm meet to being this multicellular organism, we're going to need new cells. All right, and so that idea of growth, getting bigger, development, we need new cells for that. In addition to needing it for growth, we also need it for repair. All right, if you get a cut on your hand, you don't want to be walking around with that gaping wound on your hand for the rest of your life. So how do we heal wounds as organisms? Well, we've got to make new cells to take the place of the cells that have become damaged or that have died. Okay, so repair is another reason we need to go through and create new cells. Finally, we need them for reproduction. Now, depending on whether or not we're talking about an asexually reproducing organism, remember, they're the type of organism that can pretty much go off, make their own offspring by themselves. They don't need a partner. They use it for reproduction to create essentially clones of themselves, meaning that genetically speaking, their offspring is 100% identical to their own parent. They'll typically utilize mitosis, which is what we're going to talk about here, to do that reproduction. For organisms like ourselves who are sexually reproducing, we're going to need to go through a process called meiosis, which we'll talk about in chapter 7 for reproduction. But regardless of whether they're asexual or sexual, we still need to make new cells to go through reproduction as well. So 3 big reasons we need new cells: growth, repair, and reproduction.